Hey, and welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christy McDonald. We have a lot to get to this week, including the debate on Michigan's open carry law after the mass shooting in Oregon, plus twisting some arms in Lansing when it comes to Detroit schools. But we're going to start tonight with what continues to be an evolving situation with the water crisis in Flint. After high levels of lead were found in the city's water supply from the Flint River, the state has finally taken action. Last week's plan of filters and testing was not enough. The governor just announced on Thursday that Flint is hooking back up with Detroit's water system. We are starting there tonight with our MiWeek contributors Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. All right, guys, so this situation continues to evolve. 1 week from now, the state is now saying, okay, we need to get them back on Detroit, and it's going to cost. So the governor is going to go to the legislature. They want $6 million from the state. And now you've got foundations. You've got the Mott Foundation picking up a $4 million price tag, and Flint's going to take out $2 million. Was this the right move, Nolan?
It seems like it. I mean, it seems like the only choice they had. They had to get those folks clean water, and they're a year away from being able to do that through their own system. They could have filtered, but that seems like an imprecise process, and it still would have only, it might have allowed them to have drinking water in the home, but who wants to shower in water that smells and looks like that, or wash your dishes or anything of that nature? People have to have clean water, and they're paying for it, and they weren't getting it.
So do you think this was the proper solution, if not a little late?
Yeah, no, it's a fine solution. I didn't think it was really possible because of the way that they had disconnected and then sold the pipe that connected them into the system. It seemed like this was a long shot, but obviously they figured out a way to make it work with enough money. I think again, this was a tragic set of decisions that led to the water being this dirty and undrinkable, and it's good that everybody figured out how to fix it. We still do, though, need to go back and look at the process that they went through to decide to hook up to the Flint River and not add anti-corrosives. There's something went terribly wrong here, and is it part of the emergency manager process that's problematic? I don't know. Maybe that's one of the things that help contribute to this. Is it just sloppiness on the part of Department of Environmental Quality in Lansing? Who knows? The point is, we do need to know. We need to figure it out and hold accountable those who made this mistake, and more importantly, fix it so that we don't ever do this again.
And I want to actually take a look at the short-term decision-making that was just changed, because we're looking at now 2 weeks, Nolan, 2 weeks ago that doctors came out with this report saying that you have elevated lead levels in children in Flint, and it coincides with the time period since the switch over to the Flint water. But you still didn't get a lot of reaction from the state. And going back even about 6 months from now, you had a lot of people in Flint saying, hey, something is wrong here. We need to hook back up again to the Detroit system. So I want to know what flipped the switch here in the last week or so. Why did all of a sudden the intensity flip over?
Well, I think the people were pretty vocal on their feelings about the water and the state's reaction. And I think these reports did sort of move the decision makers to say, well, we can't take any chances here. I mean, they kept looking at reports, said the water was safe. The water kept coming out of the tap looking like, putrid. And, they finally had to reconcile the two.
I think it's really interesting, too, when you hear that $4 million for this re-hookup to the Detroit system. And by the way, Detroit is only going to charge labor. They're not going to, charge the reconnect fee. Yeah. So thanks to that. But you
Which
have
is all imagined anyway.
Well, but you have $4 million coming from a foundation.
Yeah.
Again,
foundation
you have
in
foundations
Flint, right?
in Flint, the Mott Foundation, again, stepping to the forefront in helping to pay a bill for something that you would think that infrastructure, that government should be taking care of, or that we are paying our bills for, that should be taken care of.
Another one of the big lessons here is that we have divested in infrastructure in this state in a really dramatic way, and that's not just over the last 2 or 4 years, that's over the last 15 or 20 years. The way that we spend, think about, roads, sewers, water lines, all of those things in this state are getting old, and they haven't been taken care of. And so the risk of things like this, environmental crises like this, goes up. as you don't take care of those things. And you know, the governor, to his credit, has been somebody who has talked about that and has said that we need to do better with investing in infrastructure. He has not been able to get the legislature to come along. You know, it's sort of a cliched question: how many times does something like this have to happen before we start thinking differently about how we do it?
Yeah, but this wasn't a product of neglected infrastructure. This was bad decision making that they had to fix.
Well, it's both.
And the foundation community, this would seem an appropriate role for the foundation community to respond to a health emergency. Yes, it was a man-made health emergency, but the infrastructure didn't fail here. They just made the bad decision to pull water out of a really bad place.
No, but the reason that, so the water doesn't have the lead in it. The lead is coming from pipes in the system that still connect to people's homes. Those pipes should have been replaced years ago, and they weren't.
So how's reconnecting Detroit water going to help that?
Because Detroit water does not have the corrosive effect of the Flint. The water that comes out of the Flint River is really corrosive. It's corroding the lead pipes. That's putting lead in the water. Detroit water is treated differently and will not corrode the pipe. So that solves the short-term problem, but the long-term problem is these pipes. And those pipes don't just exist in Flint. You can go to places all over the state and find lead pipes carrying water on the way to people's taps. It's something that we've got to start thinking about how to fix in the state, and there is no will to come up with the money to do that.
Okay, well, let's talk about coming up with the money and talking about the bigger picture that this may be happening in Flint, but this is particularly maybe a situation that could happen in any city that's got failing infrastructure, and also maybe a municipality that doesn't have a lot of money. So, Nolan, $6 million that the governor is going to be asking the legislature for. Do you think that's going to be a hard sell, or that's going to be just a quick, easy done thing?
I don't think it's going to be a hard sell. I think they'll respond to the emergency situation here. I don't think getting $6 million for this is going to be tough to do at all. Flint may have a hard time coming up with its $2 million because it's a broke city, and then there'll be some ongoing maintenance costs that they'll have. Another $4 million. I understand that we don't know where that's going to come from, but yeah, I think people respond to emergencies.
And look at the way we funded local government. Why is Flint broke? Well, there are lots of reasons, but one of them is, again, the disinvestment at the state level in local governments, in municipalities, in urban areas. These problems all chase us around constantly here, and they sort of jump in front of our faces when something crazy happens, and we never sort of stop and say, well, what's following us? Why is it that every place we turn, this issue is still there? And the reason is the way that we prioritize and spend public money in this state.
I think it's also pretty scary too, because again, this is happening in Flint, but you can also say, yeah, this is a municipality though that does not have a lot of money and had to make a decision somewhere along the line that it was more cost effective to dip into the Flint River, and whether they had vetted all of their choices and whether they had looked and seen what the possible consequences were, but they had to weigh what was a cheaper option versus, well, it can probably just kind of get us by for the next year and a half. Nolan, is it that kind of decision making that we should be looking at, that somewhere along the line when you have to cut some kind of money, you could possibly be putting public health at risk?
Well, ultimately, this will be a good decision for Flint on the long term. They will save a good deal of money every year on their water. They probably should have waited. Well, they definitely should have waited until they had that pipe hooked up. And so they were a little too hasty, I think, in making the move. But the concept of getting a service more cheaply than you're getting it now is not a bad concept in a city that doesn't have any money.
No, it's not a bad concept. Let me ask you this, Stephen, because I'm always interested to see, because this has made national news, how the rest of the country perceives this in seeing this story. How do you think that what do you think Michigan looks like in this?
Well, I mean, we look like southern states used to look, and I say used to because most southern states have come a long way in the way that they deal with infrastructure and the way they deal with investment and things like that. Michigan is sort of taking the place of those states that didn't understand the value of investment. And again, no one's saying we should overpay for anything. No one's saying that no one's trying to question the value of a dollar. But the relative value of a dollar next to things like health, next to things like safety, next to things like opportunity is where we are all screwed up in Michigan. We value that dollar more than we value any of those other things. And that's what happened here. Flint said we can save money by connecting to a system that we don't know is safe. And the consequence was lots of kids got lead poisoning. That's not okay, and that's the kind of thing that would happen in a Mississippi 20 years ago or a Louisiana.
No, and Governor Snyder was criticized heavily for maybe not reacting to this crisis as quickly or as maybe severely as he could have. Do you think in this last week or so that he's been able to change that narrative?
Well, I mean, it takes time to come up with a solution. I think, you know, once he engaged, he came up with a solution fairly quickly. Hopefully, they'll be able to implement it quickly. I don't think there's any cost to him.
All right, we will see how this continues to play out.